I avoided my GF's friend group and she thought I was rude until I told her what they were really doing. Everyone, this is probably one of the most difficult stories I've ever had to share, but I think it's important because it deals with something that doesn't get talked about enough. My name is Jake, and this happened to me about 6 months ago with my girlfriend Sarah and her friend group. Sarah and I had been dating for about 8 months when this all started. We met through a mutual friend at college, and honestly, she was everything I could have asked for in a partner. She was smart, funny, caring, and we just clicked on every level. The only thing that made me a bit nervous early on was how tight-knit her friend group was. Sarah had this group of 5 female friends, let's call them Emma, Jessica, Taylor, Mia, and Ashley, who had all been friends since high school. They did everything together, girls' nights, weekend trips, shopping, you name it. At first, I thought it was really sweet how close they all were. Sarah would always light up when talking about them, and I could tell these friendships meant the world to her. The first time I met them was at Sarah's birthday party about 3 months into our relationship. I was honestly excited to finally meet the people who were so important to her. The party was at Sarah's apartment, and when I walked in, I immediately felt their eyes on me. Not in a judgmental way, but more like they were sizing me up. I brushed it off as normal protective friend behavior. Emma was the first one to approach me. She was probably the most outgoing of the group, with long blonde hair and this confident way of speaking that commanded attention. "So you're the famous Jake we've been hearing so much about," she said, getting a little closer than I was comfortable with. "Sarah's told us all about you." The way she said it, with this knowing smile, made me feel like there was some inside joke I wasn't part of. Throughout the night, I noticed little things that made me uncomfortable, but I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. Jessica would find excuses to touch my arm while talking to me. Taylor would make these comments about my appearance that felt more flirtatious than friendly. Mia kept asking me personal questions about my relationship with Sarah, but in a way that felt more like she was fishing for information than just being curious. The worst part was Ashley. She was quieter than the others, but when Sarah went to the bathroom, Ashley sat down next to me on the couch, way too close, and started asking me about my job, my hobbies, and then out of nowhere said, "You know, if things don't work out with Sarah, you should know that you have options." I was so shocked I didn't even know how to respond. When Sarah came back, Ashley immediately moved away and acted like nothing had happened. I left that night feeling really unsettled, but I convinced myself that I had misread the situation. Maybe they were just being overly friendly because they wanted to make sure I was good enough for their friend. Maybe I was being desensitive. But then it started happening more frequently. Every time Sarah invited me to hang out with her friends, something would happen that made me uncomfortable. Emma would accidentally spill drinks on me so she could help clean me up, getting way too handsy in the process. Jessica would constantly make sexual jokes and comments when Sarah wasn't around. Taylor would send me friend requests on social media and then like every single one of my photos, including ones from years ago. The breaking point came about 2 months after that first meeting. Sarah had invited me to a group dinner at this nice restaurant downtown. I really wanted to make an effort because I could tell it was important to her that I got along with her friends. Everything started off fine. We were all talking, laughing, having a good time, but then Sarah excused herself to take a phone call from her mom. The moment she was out of earshot, it was like a switch flipped. Emma immediately slid into Sarah's empty chair next to me. "You know," she said, her hand finding its way to my thigh, "Sarah's lucky to have you. But I can't help wondering what you're like when she's not around." I tried to move away, but Jessica was on my other side, and she started running her fingers through my hair. "You're so tense," she said. "You should let us help you relax sometime." Taylor was across from me, and she was giving me this look that made it very clear what she was thinking. Mia was recording everything on her phone like it was some kind Of joke, I felt trapped. Here I was in a public place with my girlfriend's best friends, and they were essentially sexually harassing me. But I knew that if I made a scene, it would look bad for me. Who would believe that these women were being inappropriate with me? And how could I explain it to Sarah without sounding like I was trying to turn her against her friends? When Sarah came back to the table, they all immediately returned to their seats and started acting completely normal, like nothing had happened. I spent the rest of the dinner in a daze, barely able to participate in the conversation. Sarah kept asking me if I was okay, and I kept saying I was fine, but I could tell she was starting to get frustrated with me. After that night, I made a decision. I was going to avoid Sarah's friends at all costs. When she invited me to group events, I would make excuses. I had to work late, I was feeling sick, I had family obligations, anything to get out of being around them. I thought if I just avoided them long enough, maybe they would lose interest and move on to something else. But my plan backfired spectacularly. The more I avoided her friends, the more upset Sarah became. She started asking me what was wrong, why I didn't want to spend time with the people who were most important to her. She accused me of being antisocial, of not making an effort, of not caring about the things that mattered to her. I don't understand what's wrong with you, she said to me one night after I had declined yet another invitation to hang out with her friends. They're trying so hard to include you, and you're just rejecting them. It's like you don't even want to be part of my life. That hurt more than anything because it was the exact opposite of what I wanted. I loved Sarah more than anything, and I wanted to be part of every aspect of her life. But I was trapped between not wanting to hurt her and not wanting to put myself in situations where I felt violated and uncomfortable. The worst part was that her friends started playing up my absence. When I wouldn't show up to events, they would make comments to Sarah about how I must not really care about her or how I was probably seeing someone else. They were actively trying to sabotage our relationship, and Sarah was starting to believe. Then things came to a head about 4 months after that dinner. Sarah and I had been fighting more and more about my reluctance to spend time with her friends. She was hurt and confused, and I was frustrated and scared. I could see our relationship deteriorating, and I knew I had to do something. The final straw came when Sarah told me that her friends had invited us to a weekend cabin trip. Just the 7 of us, in a remote location, for an entire weekend. The thought of being trapped with them for that long made me physically sick. When I told Sarah I couldn't go, she completely lost it. "I'm done, Jake," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I can't be with someone who won't even try to get along with my friends. They think you hate them, and honestly, I'm starting to think they're right. If you can't make this work, then maybe we should just end this now." I realized in that moment that I had two choices: lose the woman I loved or tell her the truth and risk her not believing me. It was the hardest decision I've ever had to make, but I knew I couldn't keep living this lie. "Sarah," I said, taking her hands in mine, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to promise me you'll hear me out before you react." She looked at me with this mixture of hope and fear in her eyes. "I don't hate your friends. I've been avoiding them because they've been sexually harassing me." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see her processing what I had just said, and I watched as confusion, disbelief, and anger crossed her face. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. So I told her everything. Every inappropriate comment, every unwanted touch, every time they had made me feel uncomfortable or violated. I told her about the dinner, about Ashley's comment at the birthday party, about Emma's behavior at the restaurant. I told her about how trapped I felt, how I didn't know how to handle the situation without potentially destroying her friendships. Sarah listened without interrupting, but I could see the disbelief in her eyes. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Jake, these are my best friends. They would never do something like that. Are you sure you're not just misinterpreting their friendliness?" I had expected this reaction, but it still hurt. "Sarah, I know how it sounds. I know it's hard to believe, but I'm telling you the truth. I've been miserable these past few months because I didn't know how to handle this situation. I didn't want to hurt you or destroy your friendships, but I also couldn't keep putting myself in situations where I felt violated. We spent the next few hours talking. I could tell Sarah was struggling to reconcile the friends she knew and loved with the people I was describing. She asked me questions, trying to understand why I haven't told her sooner, why I had chosen to avoid them instead of confronting the situation. I was scared, I admitted. I was scared you wouldn't believe me. I was scared you would think I was trying to manipulate you or turn you against your friends. I was scared that even if you did believe me, you would blame me somehow. Finally, Sarah said something that gave me hope. I don't want to believe this, she said, but I also can't ignore what you're telling me. If this is really happening, then we need to figure out what to do about it. We decided that the next time there was a group event, Sarah would pay closer attention to her friends' behavior around Emmy. She would look for the signs I had described and see if she could observe what I was experiencing. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Emma was having a housewarming party the following weekend, and Sarah suggested we both go. I was terrified, but I agreed because I knew it was the only way to prove to Sarah that I was telling the truth. The party was exactly what I had expected. With Sarah watching, her friends behaved differently than they had when she wasn't paying attention. Emma still made inappropriate comments, but she was more subtle about it. Jessica still found excuses to touch me, but she was more careful about when and where she did it. Taylor still made sexual jokes, but she framed them as general comments rather than directed at me specifically. But Sarah was watching now, and she started to see what I had been experiencing. When Emma made a comment about my body, Sarah noticed. When Jessica touched my arm unnecessarily, Sarah saw it. When Taylor made a joke about what I was probably like in bed, Sarah heard it. The moment that really opened Sarah's eyes came when I went to the bathroom. Sarah followed me part of the way, and when I came out, Mia was waiting for me in the hallway. She pushed me against the wall and started kissing my neck, telling me how much she had been thinking about me. I pushed her away and told her to stop, but she kept trying to touch me. Sarah saw the whole thing. She watched as I tried to get away from her friend, as I clearly and repeatedly told her to stop, as Mia ignored my protests and continued to try to force herself on me. When Sarah cleared her throat, Mia jumped away from me like she had been burned. What the hell is going on here? Sarah demanded. Mia tried to play it off. We were just talking, she said. Jake was telling me about how unhappy he is with you, but Sarah wasn't buying it. That's not what I just saw, she said firmly. I saw you forcing yourself on my boyfriend after he told you to stop. The confrontation that followed was intense. Sarah demanded explanations from all of her friends. At first, they tried to deny everything, but when Sarah pressed them, the truth started to come out. Emma admitted that they had been testing me to see if I was faithful to Sarah. Jessica claimed they were just being friendly and that I had misinterpreted their behavior. Taylor said they were just joking around and that I was being desensitive, but Sarah wasn't having any of it. You don't get to touch someone without their consent and call it a joke, she said. You don't get to sexually harass my boyfriend and claim you're testing his faithfulness. What you did was wrong, and I can't believe you've been doing this for months. The friendships didn't survive the confrontation. Sarah was forced to choose between her friends and me, and she chose me. It wasn't an easy decision for her. These were relationships she had maintained for years, but she couldn't continue to be friends with people who had violated her boyfriend and then lied about it. The aftermath was difficult for both of us. Sarah felt guilty for not believing me sooner, and she was heartbroken about losing her friend group. I felt guilty for being the cause of that loss, even though I knew intellectually that it wasn't my fault. We both had to work through a lot of emotions and trauma. We started going to couples counseling to help us process what had happened and rebuild trust in our relationship. Sarah also started individual therapy to work through her feelings about the loss of her friendships and her guilt about not recognizing what was happening sooner. It's been about 6 months since all of this happened, and I'm happy to say that Sarah and I are stronger than ever. We've learned to communicate better, and we've both grown from this experience. Sarah has made new friends who respect both of us and our relationship, and I've learned to speak up when I'm uncomfortable instead of suffering in silence. The reason I'm sharing this story is because I want other people to know that sexual harassment can happen to anyone, regardless of gender. I want people to understand that it's not always obvious or dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle, persistent, and designed to make the victim feel like they're overreacting or imagining things. I also want people to know that it's okay to speak up when you're being harassed, even if you're worried about the consequences. I spent months being miserable because I was afraid of how the truth would affect my relationship, but in the end, the truth was what saved it. If you're going through something similar, please know that you're not alone and it's not your fault. Find someone you trust and tell them what's happening. Don't suffer in silence like I did. You deserve to feel safe and respected in all of your relationships. Thanks for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there who might be going through something similar.